Hi everyone, this is Kat the Farmer. I'm going to show you how to use the crop plan templates that are on my website and walk you through how to use them to best make your farm or garden plan for the year. So once you open up the crop plan template page, you have the option to open it in Google Sheets or as an Excel file. If you have access to Google Drive, I suggest opening it in Google Sheets. So we'll click on that and it'll take you to the blank crop planner. Now, if you try and edit this, you are going to get an error message, but pay attention to this yellow cell here. What you need to do is make a copy and save it to your own drive. So we'll go to File, make a copy, and then you can rename it for your farm plan 2055, whatever year it is when you're watching this. Okay, so once you do that, it'll open up your own version of that crop plan and spreadsheet that I've created for you. And the first page of the spreadsheet is the directions. You can walk through these directions one at a time. The numbers indicate which page down here at the bottom you're going to be working on. So the first page is your farm info, where you enter in your last frost date in the spring, your first frost date in the fall, and then you'll also want to enter in your field names. And you'll notice if you scroll all the way down to the bottom, I've also added in no location planned, which will come in handy later. So I recommend leaving that there. You'll also want to type in your sales units. So this could be bunches, pounds, bushels, ears, heads, things like that. Sometimes each is a nice placeholder for a lot of crops. Your sales units should match your harvest units for record keeping simplicity. And once you've entered all those in, you're going to go and populate your crop list. That's number 2 down here. So there's just 2 dummy crops typed in here now. Let's say we are going to do lettuce, a crop I grow a lot of. And this is a Salanova type lettuce, so the kind that you transplant. And for me, on a 40-inch bed top, I do 5 rows per bed at 6-inch spacing in each of those rows. And I get about, let's say, ½ pound per foot. So that's what a bed foot is. It's each foot of bed, no matter how wide your bed is. And sales unit is $12 per pound, so that's 12. And days in the greenhouse is typically 30. Days in the field, let's say 50. Tray type, I usually use a 128 cell. And since this is Salanova and not a direct seeded lettuce type, it's going to be transplant. And so I don't need to enter cedar or cedar plate info. But I could say that I want 7 days between successions. In the pre-filled out crop plan, you'll see this column filled in with my recommendations for how often you want to be seeding those crops for a continuous supply. And what I type in that column sometimes depends on the fact that you'll make a big planting and harvest half of it one week, the other half the next week, and then you'll want to plant again. So that would be one way to look at those numbers. Now in these gray columns, I have calculations. In all the gray columns, there are calculations being made, so you never want to edit those. But what you'll have here is a rough guide. In the pre-filled crop plan, it's less rough, it's more refined to each type of crop and their tolerance to frost. But here what you'll see is that your earliest outdoor planting is going to be 2 days after your last frost as the safe recommendation. Now if you had a tunnel, it's going to be a month prior. And your latest outdoor planting is going to be your first frost in the fall, minus days to maturity, minus an extra 14 because things tend to take 2 more weeks in the fall. And then your last outdoor planting into the tunnel is going to be this number plus an extra month. So that's how all the calculations all the way down are done. So you can see how entering that days to maturity is going to affect what the recommendations are in these cells. Now when you go to your crop plan, which is the next step in number 3, you can look back to these numbers and make sure you're not going too far over the recommendations or planting too early unless you have some prior knowledge that that's going to work out for you. Okay, so once you've typed in all your crops and maybe all your varieties, I could choose to do lettuce, Starstruck, mix, and enter my direct seeding lettuce in here differently, and maybe I would do head lettuce in here on a separate line if when I plan my successions I want them to show up on different dates and different lines. That might also be important with things like peppers, where some of those hot peppers need to be started so far in advance that you handle them completely differently than a sweet pepper might be in the greenhouse. So that'll determine which your crops are and how many varieties you enter in here, but it's totally fine to say something vague like this. If kale, chard, and collard is always seeded on the same day, planted the same way, yields a similar amount, that sort of thing. Yeah, and so now we're at the crop plan itself. So every crop you enter will show up as you choose a crop in the drop down. And if you, as you go through these, you can also select the variety. And what you're going to do is you are only going to type into the pale yellow cells. So if you know that you want to begin harvesting crop 1 on April 30th, this spreadsheet is going to figure out that you need to seed that crop on January 30th. So that is figured out for you, and the total bed feet is another thing that you get to decide. So it will figure out based on what you entered in on number 2, your crop list, that you need 150 plants to fill out a total of 25 bed feet. Now if you change that to 50, you'll see the plants change and the gross income projection changes. And with things like lettuce mix that you're going to do over 20 successions of in the season, the great tool is this filter at the top. So you can filter the crops by going to all, and then instead of selecting everything, you just select crop 1. Let's pretend it's lettuce. It's only going to show you crop 1. And so you can look at all your successions and make sure that they're all there. And if you have, good assortment of crops, it's nice to only work on one crop at a time so that you don't get bogged down with all the dates and accidentally edit the wrong thing. You can enter all those in, and you can even enter details here like this definitely has to go in the tunnel, or this might be intercropped around tomatoes, things that you need to remember later but you're planning for now. And then you can also enter a planting location here. The thing about this spreadsheet is it's not going to really tell you whether or not you've planned enough to fill up your farm, or maybe you've planned too much. That's a pretty tricky thing to figure out. But at the end, it will add up your total bed feet, and you can get a sense of that being reasonable or not based on how tight your successions are. If you're just going to plant once and then harvest everything and cover crop at the end of the season, then you don't want to have more bed feet planned than you have space on your farm at the basic. Okay, so we've entered in all of our crops. So now when you get to season totals, you're just looking at calculations the spreadsheet is done for you. You don't have to type anything in on this page or the subsequent pages. So looks like we've planned a total of 100 bed feet. We plan to make $500 by growing crop 1 and crop 2, and that just gives you an overall revenue perspective. Now, have I ever in my years of farming grown the exact number of dollars that I had planned on a spreadsheet? Absolutely not. Sometimes it's a third of what I plan, sometimes it's half, but these sort of yield projections based on sort of ideal harvest and ideal pricing and timing, it's such a variable thing on a farm, so just remember that. The other thing that'll be generated is a greenhouse seeding. So as you are entering your crops, you selected whether they were transplanted or direct seeded, and all the transplanted crops will show up on this greenhouse seeding chart. It also has a column that you can select whether or not a crop has been seeded. You can also type in the actual seeding date. Let's say instead of January 30th, which was a Sunday, you seeded it on Monday, you'll write January 31st over here, and then an actual planting date into the field. Notes are nice in case you decide to do something a little funny, like a test of covering with vermiculite or seeding 2 per cell instead of 1. This will be your greenhouse plan. You can also go to print this and give yourself a print copy for having in a binder in the greenhouse, so you can fill it out there. So in addition to seeding in the greenhouse, you'll also be doing field seeding. So your direct seeded crops will show up on this plan, and it, yes, also has seeded actual bed feet and actual planting location, and then bed feet and rows per bed are in columns there as a guide. Perhaps in tandem to having this printed out in a binder, you might also print out your crop list, because that has your seeder plate and seeder info typed into it. So that can be a reference for you to print out as well. So as you can see, your filled out crop plan generates the greenhouse seeding, the field seeding, and the season totals pages. It also generates a seed ordering checklist. So you can go down and order enough provider beans based on the total number of seeds or plants that you needed in your crop plan. And this column shows you a buffer column of about 10% extra, and you can check those off and indicate your source. Now as you're shopping, what you're going to see is that each of the seed suppliers will let you know how many packets or grams you'll need to order in order to get that total seed count that you're looking for. But this should make it easy to make sure you don't omit ordering something that you needed. So that is the crop planning spreadsheet. If you want to explore what the filled one looks out, it costs $5 to get access to that, but you can definitely build it from scratch if you want to, and use this as a starting point if you need to add columns in. You can do that. Say you have a specific thing that you need to track for your farm. You can add columns. Just be sure not to edit the formulas unless you really understand how they are working in the spreadsheet. All the gray cells contain formulas, and as you add in, let's say you were to insert a row below, you notice that there's no formula in that row that I just added. So instead of doing that, you can Control C and then Control V. So now I've duplicated the row above, and then I can edit it, and you'll see it does have the formulas copied down. So just inserting a row will insert a blank row, and to avoid that, you'll want to copy down. So if you were to purchase the pre-filled out sheet, the things that would look different are that your crop list is filled in with all these standard crops that you might find. 35 of them are already plugged in, along with some of my favorite varieties, and recommended rows per bed in row spacing, yield per bed foot, and harvest unit, recommended seeding trace type, and recommended number of days per succession. These gray columns are also custom tailored to each of the crops based on their cold hardiness instead of just the standard wait till after frost or a month before frost for tunnel planting. As you go into crop plan, I also have all of my successions planned in for you. So you can see summer squash has 3 successions, leeks just 1, radishes has many, beans has 3, and that's all based on the recommended amount of planting dates based on a continuous harvest or best dates for planting that one crop. You'll also notice I've added into the details column for tunnel planting or for field planting or may need to row cover. And I feel like that's really helpful to know sort of which plantings need extra coddling and which do not, so you can choose which ones are right for you. It also generates a seed order, so you'll see the number of seeds needed as a count. You'll see what it means to order 10% extra, and then you can check it off and indicate your source, where you decided to purchase it from. And like with the blank crop plan, it generates a greenhouse seeding list based on date and a field seeding list also based on date, as well as the season total. So I would not recommend just taking this crop plan and running. I would adjust to just the crops you want to grow on your farm, and then also make sure to adjust the bed feet and the number of rows per bed to fit your system and bed maker or layout. But you can see just sort of the stock numbers that are in here come to $68,000 and 88,000 bed feet. All right, so that's what you get when you purchase the pre-filled crop list. I think this will give you a good start to your crop plan and to a very abundant year. So thank you so much for finding this spreadsheet, and I hope it gets you on the right track. Have a great day.